My dad called me a mistake, so I hid my baby in our basement. But when my boyfriend's mother found out, she stalked us for months and tried to get CPS to take our son away. Little did she know her obsession would cost her everything. My dad admitted he wished he pulled out from my mom, but he couldn't resist. He said he was only 17 years old when he had me, and it was all a mistake. That I was the reason he was depressed, alone, and broke. Thanks to him, I grew up hating myself, like my life was one big joke born out of the excited boy's mistake. I didn't value my life in the slightest, so I chased substances and pleasures, which lead to me getting pregnant at 16. When I saw those double lines, I freaked out. I cried in the bathroom for days. All I knew was that I couldn't tell my dad. Things would only get worse between him and I, so I went to my grandmother, who in my eyes was always my guardian angel. She was my mom's mom, and my mom left when I was a baby, so she was the only connection I had to that whole side of the family. She never liked my dad, said he abandoned my mom when she was pregnant, then showed up years later acting like a hero when it was already too late. As soon as he showed up, my mom left me. Grandma refuses to tell me why. Still, when I told her I was pregnant, she didn't yell. She didn't look disappointed. She hugged me. She said she'd help me figure it out. We agreed that I'd hide the pregnancy, stay in school, and once the baby was born, we'd make a plan. Her house was too small, and my dad would never let me live with her, so we agreed on something kind of crazy. I'd keep the baby in our basement. I know how that sounds, but it wasn't some dirty, dark place. We cleared out a space, added a heater and blankets and supplies. My boyfriend Liam would come by through the side door when my dad was working. He brought diapers, formula, whatever we needed. It wasn't perfect, but we were surviving. I hid my pregnancy by staying as far away from my dad as possible, and because he was so emotionally absent, it really wasn't hard. My baby Noah born in secret at my grandma's house. I didn't go to the hospital. We had a retired nurse help with it, someone my grandma knew from church. After that, I took care of my son every night in the basement while my dad thought I was doing homework or watching TV. I was exhausted all the time. Liam helped when he could, but he was working too. We were waiting until I turned 17 so we could get a place together and be free. But then everything exploded one night in the middle of January. The furnace broke and the house was freezing. My dad was trying to find the space heaters, and I knew before he even opened the basement door that this was it. I heard him go down there. Then I heard silence. Then footsteps back up the stairs, but slower. When he came into the kitchen, he was holding a tiny sock in his hand, and his face looked like he'd seen a ghost. He didn't yell. He just asked, "Whose baby is in my house?" I wanted to lie, but I couldn't. I told him the truth, and he lost it. He was pacing and shouting and saying, "You ruined your life, and how could you do this in my house? And is this what I worked my butt off for?" I told him I was leaving, taking my baby and going to grandma's. He tried to stop me, but I was done. I left that night with my baby in a car seat and my grandma waiting in the driveway. The next few weeks were awful. My dad didn't call. I didn't call him. Grandma was stressed out. She blamed him for everything. She said if he'd just shown me grace, maybe I wouldn't have felt like I had to hide. But I knew part of it was my fault too. I didn't trust him to tell him the truth. I had just assumed he'd hate me the way he seemed to hate himself. Then it got worse. Liam's parents found out. His mom even offered to pay him to walk away and leave me. She told him she'd give enough so he could go to college out of state and start fresh. But he said no. He chose to stay. My dad somehow found out, and to my surprise, he said he respected Liam for that. I think he just saw his younger self in Liam, but maybe a version of him that could do better. Things were almost looking up for a while. My dad seemed to accept Noah when we spoke over the phone, but then my grandma had a heart attack. It was minor, but it was enough to scare me. I had to go back to my dad's house. There wasn't anywhere else. He didn't say much at first, just set up the crib in my room and went back to work. And for a few months, things were okay. My baby was growing, my dad was more involved, and Liam was as present as a dad in his situation could be. But then it happened. We were trying to rebuild something one night when CPS showed up. Someone had reported an unfit environment for an infant. All hell broke loose. My grandma thought my dad did it. My dad thought grandma did it. They argued in front of the social worker about it. It was a mess. The worker had to get them to calm down. We sat down with her soon after and explained everything. The entire history. The full truth of how Noah got here. And that's when she revealed something that made my jaw drop. The person who reported us wasn't grandma or my dad. It was Liam's mom. She wanted the baby taken away so Liam wouldn't have to ruin his life. The case is currently ongoing, and I have no idea what to do. The CPS worker scheduled a follow-up visit for 48 hours later, leaving us with a stack of paperwork and a list of requirements. My hands shook as I clutched Noah against my chest, watching her car pull away from our driveway. Dad and grandma were still going at it in the living room, their voices carrying through the thin walls. Dad slammed his fist on the coffee table. Grandma fired back, pointing her finger at him. Neither of them noticed when I slipped upstairs with Noah, needing space to process what had just happened. Liam's mother had weaponized the system against us. This wasn't about Noah's safety. This was about control. I laid Noah in his crib and started pacing my room, trying to figure out our next move. The CPS worker had been thorough, taking photos of every corner of our house, asking about Noah's medical records, our income, everything. She'd seemed sympathetic but professional, making it clear she had to follow protocol regardless of the circumstances. My phone buzzed. Liam was on his way over after work. I texted him back, warning him about the situation. 20 minutes later, I heard his car in the driveway, then footsteps on the stairs. He burst through my bedroom door, still in his work uniform, face flushed with anger. He went straight to Noah's crib, checking on our son before turning to me. His jaw was clenched tight, hands balled into fists. I explained everything that had happened, watching his expression shift from anger to disbelief to determination. We were interrupted by a commotion downstairs. Liam's mother's voice cut through the air like a knife. We rushed to the window and saw her car in our driveway, the CPS worker's vehicle pulling up behind it. My stomach dropped. Liam bolted downstairs. I grabbed Noah and followed, finding everyone gathered in our living room. Liam's mother stood by the door, addressing the CPS worker directly. She gestured wildly, her voice rising with each word about how her son was being trapped by this girl and her dysfunctional family. The CPS worker maintained her professional demeanor, taking notes while Liam's mother ranted. Dad stood in the corner, arms crossed, looking like he might explode. Grandma sat on the couch, one hand pressed to her chest, breathing heavily. The worker asked to see the basement. My heart sank. I knew how it would look, even though we'd already moved everything upstairs. Liam's mother followed us down, and I watched her face light up with satisfaction as the worker documented the space. I tried explaining it had been temporary, that we'd only used it for a few weeks when we had no other option, but Liam's mother cut me off, pulling out her phone. She showed the CPS worker photos she'd taken through our basement windows, time time-stamped photos going back months. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She'd been watching us, stalking us, planning this. The worker's expression shifted slightly as she looked at the photos. She asked Liam's mother how she'd obtained them. The response was smooth, practiced. She claimed she'd been concerned and checking on her grandchild's welfare. Back upstairs, Grandma's phone rang. Her doctor's name flashed on the screen. She answered, and I watched the color drain from her face. The stress was affecting her heart. She needed to reduce her stress levels immediately, or risk another cardiac event. The CPS worker noticed Grandma's distress and suggested we continue another time. As she prepared to leave, she pulled me aside. Her advice was simple but clear. Document everything, get a lawyer if possible, and be prepared for a fight. After everyone left, we sat around the kitchen table in silence. Noah fussed in my arms, picking up on the tension. Dad finally spoke, his voice different than I'd ever heard it. He said we'd handle this as a family, together. That night, I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through Facebook on my phone and my blood ran cold. Liam's mother had been busy, post after post in local community groups, all carefully worded to avoid naming names but clearly about us. Concerned grandmother, worried about teen parents in an unsafe environment. The comments were brutal. People who didn't know us, judging us based on her twisted version of events. Some offered to call CPS themselves. Others shared horror stories about teen parents they knew. She was building an army against us. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. I found Dad in Noah's room, holding my son and rocking him gently. He was whispering something I couldn't quite make out. When I stepped closer, the words became clear. He was promising Noah that he wouldn't let them take him away. Dad noticed me in the doorway. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then he started talking, really talking, for the first time in years. He told me about when I was born, how CPS had gotten involved then too. My teenage mother, overwhelmed and scared. The threats of losing custody, the investigations. The difference was, my mom chose to run rather than fight. She left me with Dad and disappeared, too afraid to face the system. Dad had been barely 18, suddenly alone with a baby, dealing with social workers and court dates. The trauma had shaped everything that came after. My phone lit up with a text from Liam. His mother had locked him out of their house. His bank account, which she had access to as a co-signer from when he was younger, had been frozen. She was trying to force him to abandon us by cutting off his resources. Grandma spent the next morning on the phone despite doctor's orders. She called every family friend she could think of, building a list of people who could testify about my fitness as a mother. Her church friends, my teachers, neighbors who'd seen me with Noah. She was building our defense. I needed to get more baby supplies from the attic, and while searching through boxes, I found something that stopped me cold. Dad's old journals, hidden beneath some Christmas decorations. I knew I shouldn't read them, but I couldn't help myself. The entries were from when he was 17, page after page about his own CPS case. The fear, the anger, the feeling of being judged unfit before he'd even had a chance to try. History was repeating itself, generation after generation of young parents fighting the same battle. I was still processing this when the doorbell rang. The CPS worker had returned for a surprise visit, catching us in the middle of breakfast. Normal, everyday breakfast. Noah in his high chair, making a mess with baby cereal. Dad reading the news on his phone. Grandma making coffee. A perfectly ordinary family moment. The worker observed us for an hour, taking notes. She watched me feed Noah, change his diaper, soothe him when he fussed. She saw Dad helping without being asked. Grandma offering advice without overstepping. She saw us functioning as a family unit. After she left, Dad shocked me with an apology. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, really looking at me for the first time in years. He admitted he'd been taking his failures out on me, projecting his own self-hatred onto his daughter. I wasn't a mistake, he said. He'd just been a scared kid who became a scared man. Later that day, I did a deep dive into Liam's mother's social media. What I found made my skin crawl. She'd been building a case against us for months, long before CPS got involved. Screenshots of every photo I'd posted of Noah, comments taken out of context, a digital paper trail designed to paint us as unfit parents. She'd even approached my school counselor, trying to gather evidence of my unfitness. Thankfully, the counselor had refused to break confidentiality, but the fact that she'd tried showed how far she was willing to go. My grades were suffering from juggling baby care, CPS requirements, and school. Each missed assignment, each tardy, became another piece of ammunition for her to use against us. I was drowning, and she was documenting every moment I went under. The retired nurse who'd helped deliver Noah called Grandma. She couldn't provide a statement to CPS because she was terrified of legal consequences for practicing without a license. Another ally lost to fear. I started my own documentation, a detailed log of Noah's care, including feeding schedules, diaper changes, doctor visits, developmental milestones. Every moment of his life recorded, proof that he was loved and cared for despite our circumstances. I was updating the log when Liam's mother showed up at our door. Liam was at work, unable to protect us from her latest assault. She stood on our porch with a manila folder, talking loudly about grandparents' rights and how she wouldn't be kept from her grandchild. Dad handled it, stepping outside and closing the door behind him. I watched from the window as they talked, her animated gestures contrasting with his crossed arms. Whatever he said, it worked. She left, but not before shooting a venomous look at the house. Over the next few days, 3 different neighbors approached Dad. Liam's mother had been making rounds in the neighborhood, asking people to report concerns about the baby. Most were uncomfortable with her requests, recognizing manipulation when they saw it, but it showed her strategy: build a false consensus about our unfitness. I recognized her tactics from my psychology class. She was attempting to create social proof, making it seem like everyone agreed we were unfit parents. If enough people believed it, or seemed to believe it, maybe the authorities would too. Then we got an unexpected ally. Liam's younger sister Sarah, only 14, reached out through Instagram. Her message was simple but shocking. Her mom had lost it. There was a whole binder about us. She wanted to help. We met secretly at a coffee shop while her mom was at work. Sarah looked nervous but determined. She revealed that her mother had hired a private investigator to follow me and document any moment that could be construed as neglect. Every time I looked tired, every time Noah cried in public, every normal parenting moment twisted into evidence of unfitness. When Liam confronted his mother that night, her response was revealing. She claimed she was saving him from ruining his life, like your father ruined mine. The real issue wasn't our age or our capabilities. It was her own unresolved trauma, projected onto her son. Dad tried to arrange a meeting with her, parent to parent. He wanted to handle things civilly, to find common ground, but she refused to acknowledge him as Noah's grandfather, refused to see our family as legitimate. To her, we were just children playing house, and she was the only real adult in the situation. situation. The following week brought new complications. Liam's mother started showing up at Dad's workplace, chatting with his boss during lunch breaks. She positioned herself as a concerned grandmother worried about her grandchild's welfare. Dad discovered this when his boss pulled him aside, mentioning the difficult situation at home. The manipulation was spreading beyond our family circle. I watched Dad's jaw tighten as he processed this information. He'd worked at the same company for 8 years, building a reputation as reliable and hardworking. Now his personal life was bleeding into his professional world, threatening the stability he'd fought to maintain. That evening, I overheard Dad on the phone with his siblings. He hadn't spoken to them in years, but desperation was breaking down old walls. His sister lived 2 states away, his brother in the next town. Both offered support, shocked to learn they had a great nephew they'd never met. The isolation Dad had built around himself was crumbling, replaced by something stronger. Liam moved in with us officially after his mother changed the locks. He brought 2 suitcases and a determination that impressed even Dad. The spare room became his, and we established new routines. Noah seemed happier with both parents under the same roof, his giggles filling spaces that had been silent for too long. Sarah texted me screenshots from her mother's computer. The private investigator's reports were extensive, documenting everything from my coffee shop visits to doctor appointments. One photo showed me yawning while pushing Noah's stroller. The caption read, "Mother appears exhausted, possibly neglectful." The violation of privacy made my skin crawl. During my next psychology class, I researched narcissistic behavior patterns. Everything I read matched Liam's mother's actions: the need for control, the inability to accept her son's autonomy, the manipulation tactics. Understanding her psychology didn't make dealing with her easier, but it helped me predict her next moves. The CPS worker scheduled another visit, this time bringing a supervisor. They interviewed each of us separately, asking detailed questions about Noah's care. I showed them my documentation, the feeding logs, the medical records, the developmental milestones he was hitting right on schedule. The supervisor seemed impressed by our organization. Grandma's health remained fragile. She attended the CPS meetings but couldn't handle extended stress. Her doctor prescribed new medications and insisted on weekly checkups. Watching her struggle with her health while fighting for our family added another layer of urgency to our situation. Late one night, researching legal precedents, I discovered something significant. Liam's mother had been through a custody battle before. Court records showed she'd lost custody of Liam's older half-brother 15 years ago. The details were sealed, but the fact remained. This wasn't her first attempt at controlling her children's lives. I shared this information with our newly hired family lawyer, a friend of Grandma's from church who offered reduced rates. She made notes, her expression thoughtful. This pattern of behavior could be crucial in establishing Liam's mother's motivations as control rather than concern. The next morning brought another surprise. Liam's half-brother, Nicholas, contacted him through social media. Now 25 and living 3 hours away, he'd heard about our situation through family gossip. His message was clear. He wanted to help. He'd been through this before. We met Nicholas at a restaurant halfway between our towns. He looked like an older version of Liam, with the same kind eyes but carrying years of hard-won wisdom. He told us his story, how his mother had driven away his father through similar tactics. The custody battle had been brutal, but ultimately, the court had seen through her manipulations. Nicholas offered to testify about his mother's pattern of behavior. He'd kept records, emails, and court documents from his own case. The relief on Liam's face was palpable. He wasn't alone in this. His brother understood. Meanwhile, I focused on maintaining normalcy for Noah. Despite the chaos swirling around us, his routine remained stable. Morning feedings, afternoon naps, evening baths. I documented everything, creating a paper trail of competent parenting that no investigator could dispute. Dad surprised me by attending AA meetings. He'd been sober for 2 months, but the stress was testing his resolve. He came home from meetings calmer, more centered. He even started journaling again, processing his emotions on paper instead of bottling them up. The pediatrician provided a glowing report about Noah's health and development. She noted his weight gain was perfect, his motor skills developing normally, his attachment to both parents secure and healthy. She offered to provide a statement to CPS, another professional voice countering the false narrative. Liam's mother escalated her tactics. She began showing up at his workplace, causing scenes that embarrassed him in front of coworkers. His manager, understanding the situation, banned her from the premises. But the damage to Liam's professional reputation was another stress we didn't need. I discovered she'd been attending the same church as several CPS workers, trying to build relationships that might influence our case. The manipulation was sophisticated, but also desperate. She was throwing everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. Sarah continued feeding us information. Her mother had spent thousands on the private investigator and lawyer. The financial strain was showing. Sarah overheard phone calls about credit card bills and loan applications. The campaign against us was bankrupting her, but she couldn't stop. One afternoon, while Noah napped, I found Dad in the garage going through old boxes. He showed me photos from when I was a baby, documents from his own teenage years. His eyes were wet as he talked about the dreams he'd had, how fear and anger had poisoned them. He was determined not to let history repeat itself. The CPS supervisor called with positive news. Their initial assessment found no evidence of neglect or abuse. Noah was thriving, our home was safe, and we had a strong support system. They would recommend closing the case, though the final decision would take several more weeks. Liam's mother's reaction to this news was swift and desperate. She filed a complaint with the supervisor's boss, alleging bias. She contacted state representatives, trying to trigger a higher-level investigation. Each move reeked of desperation, a woman watching her control slip away. Dad's siblings arrived for a weekend visit. My aunt and uncle, strangers until recently, embraced their roles as great aunt and uncle with enthusiasm. They brought gifts for Noah and offers of ongoing support. The family that had been fractured for years was healing, united by crisis. I maintained my grades through sheer determination. Teachers, aware of my situation, offered extensions and extra help. My guidance counselor wrote a letter praising my resilience and dedication to education, despite extraordinary challenges. Another voice countering the unfit mother narrative. The investigation into Liam's mother's workplace conduct began when her employer noticed financial discrepancies. She'd been using company resources for her campaign against us. The private investigator had been paid through expense accounts, legal fees hidden in fabricated client entertainment. The web of deception was unraveling. Nicholas arrived for an extended visit, wanting to support his brother. He brought boxes of documentation from his own custody case. Reading through them revealed a pattern of behavior spanning decades. The same tactics, the same manipulation, manipulations, the same desperate need for control. Our lawyer built a compelling case. The stalking, the false reports, the workplace harassment, the financial deception. What had started as a custody concern was revealing itself as a criminal pattern of harassment and fraud. The tables were turning. Grandma's health stabilized with proper treatment and reduced stress. She began hosting family dinners, bringing everyone together around her table. These moments of normalcy, of family bonding, became precious. Noah gurgled happily in his high chair, unaware of the battle being fought for his future. Dad reached 90 days sober and received his chip at an AA meeting. I attended with him, watching him share his story with the group. He talked about second chances, about breaking cycles, about choosing love over fear. His transformation was remarkable. The financial audit at Liam's mother's workplace revealed she'd embezzled nearly $30,000. The money had funded private investigators, lawyers, and her campaign against us. Her employer filed charges, and suddenly she was facing criminal prosecution. Sarah moved in with her father temporarily, unable to handle her mother's increasingly erratic behavior. She testified in a family court hearing about the home environment, the obsessive behavior, the binders full of surveillance photos. Her bravery in speaking truth impressed everyone. Multiple professionals now supported us. Teachers, doctors, social workers, neighbors. The community Liam's mother had tried to turn against us instead rallied to our defense. Her tactics had backfired spectacularly. The CPS case moved toward closure. Every requirement had been met, every concern addressed. Noah was healthy, loved, and thriving. Our family, though unconventional, was strong. The system designed to protect children was working correctly, seeing through manipulation to truth. Liam's mother made increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control. She contacted distant relatives, trying to build allies. She created fake social media accounts to spread rumors. Each action further demonstrated her instability and undermined her credibility. Dad and I finally had honest conversations about our past. He acknowledged the damage his words had caused, how his self-hatred had poisoned our relationship. I forgave him, understanding that hurt people hurt people. We were breaking the cycle together. The extended family network grew stronger. Cousins I'd never met offered babysitting help. Great aunts sent care packages. The isolation that had defined our family for years was replaced by connection and support. Noah would grow up surrounded by love. Liam's mother's criminal charges became public. Her reputation in the community crumbled as people learned about the embezzlement. The image she'd cultivated of concerned grandmother was replaced by the reality of a desperate woman who'd stolen to fund a harassment campaign. Our lawyer filed for a restraining order, documenting the stalking, harassment, and threats. The evidence was overwhelming. Photos taken through windows, false reports to authorities, workplace harassment, financial manipulation. The legal system was finally catching up with her actions. I watched Noah reach developmental milestones with joy. First smiles, first laughs, rolling over. Each moment documented not for legal reasons, but for memories. Despite everything, we were building a beautiful life together. Dad's transformation inspired others in the family. Cousins dealing with their own trauma sought help. The healing rippled outward, touching lives beyond our immediate circle. Sometimes crisis reveals strength we didn't know existed. The CPS supervisor officially recommended case closure. No evidence of neglect or abuse had been found. Instead, they discovered a young family under attack from a manipulative individual. Their report was thorough and supportive. Liam struggled with complex emotions about his mother. He loved her, but recognized her toxicity. Therapy helped him process these feelings, understanding he could maintain boundaries while still hoping for her eventual healing. His strength through this ordeal impressed me daily. As the criminal investigation progressed, more evidence emerged. Liam's mother had hired multiple private investigators, spending embezzled funds recklessly. Her obsession had consumed her financially and emotionally. The prosecutor built a strong case. Sarah testified in family court about her mother's behavior. She described the binders full of photos, the constant plotting, the way her mother's obsession had destroyed their home life. Her testimony was powerful, a daughter choosing truth over enabling. The restraining order hearing arrived. We presented our evidence methodically. The stalking photos, the false reports, the harassment documentation. Liam's mother's attorney tried to spin it as grandmotherly concern, but the judge saw through the facade. Noah's first birthday approached as legal proceedings continued. We planned a small celebration, just family and close friends. The guest list included people who'd stood by us through the ordeal. It would be a celebration not just of Noah's life, but of our survival. Dad marked 6 months sober with quiet pride. He'd faced the stress without relapsing, choosing healthy coping mechanisms instead. His journal entries from this period showed remarkable growth and self-awareness. He was becoming the father he'd always wanted to be. The criminal trial date was set. Liam's mother faced serious charges for embezzlement and fraud. Her lawyer negotiated for a plea deal, but the prosecutor held firm. The evidence was too strong, the amount stolen too significant. We focused on building our future while the legal system handled the past. I researched colleges with strong support systems for student parents. Liam pursued promotions at work. Dad took on extra shifts to build savings. We were planning for success, not just survival. The family court judge issued the restraining order. Liam's mother was prohibited from contacting us or coming within 500 feet of our home. The legal protection felt like a weight lifting from our shoulders. We could finally breathe. As we prepared for Noah's birthday party, I reflected on the journey. What had started as a teenage pregnancy hidden in shame had become a story of family resilience. We'd faced manipulation, legal battles, and health scares, but we'd emerged stronger. The extended family gathered for Noah's celebration. Dad's siblings, Nicholas, Sarah, Grandma's church friends, our supporters, the house filled with laughter and love. Noah, oblivious to the battles fought for him, smashed his cake with gleeful abandon. Liam's mother accepted a plea deal, avoiding trial but accepting responsibility. She received probation and mandatory therapy. The court ordered no contact with Noah until he was old enough to decide for himself. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was resolution. Sarah revealed her mother was planning something big for court, having hired a new aggressive lawyer. The warning came just days before our final hearing, delivered through a frantic text message. I showed it to our lawyer, who immediately began preparing counter strategies. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court confirmed Liam's mother's narcissistic control patterns. The evaluator documented her inability to respect boundaries, her manipulation tactics, and her pattern of using systems meant to protect children as weapons against those who defied her. The professional diagnosis carried weight that our personal testimonies couldn't match. Dad spent hours organizing his journal entries from the past year, creating creating a timeline of his transformation. Each entry showed growth, accountability, and dedication to breaking generational patterns. He highlighted moments where he'd chosen support over criticism, understanding over anger. The physical evidence of change filled 3 notebooks. 20 character witnesses prepared statements for our final hearing. Teachers wrote about my dedication to education despite challenges. Neighbors described watching me care for Noah with patience and love. Medical professionals documented his excellent health and development. Each voice added to our defense. Then Liam's mother released edited videos online, suggesting I had somehow groomed her minor son. The timestamps had been altered, conversations spliced together out of context. The desperation in this move was obvious to anyone who knew the real timeline, but strangers online began sharing the videos with outraged comments. Community backlash came swiftly. People who actually knew us recognized the deceptive editing immediately. Several parents from Noah's playgroup posted their own videos, showing me interacting appropriately with all children, including my own son. The attempted character assassination backfired as more people saw through the manipulation. Some extended family members began wavering in their support. A few cousins wondered if we'd been too harsh on Liam's mother, suggesting maybe she was just a concerned grandmother after all. The pressure to drop the restraining order intensified, with well-meaning relatives urging me to be the bigger person. I recognized this pattern from my research on abuse cycles. The push to forgive and forget, to minimize harm for the sake of family harmony. But Noah's safety came first. Despite the pressure, I maintained our boundaries, explaining that protection wasn't punishment. The night before our final hearing, Liam's mother sent a barrage of emails to every family member she could reach. She claimed we were alienating her from her grandchild, that she was being persecuted for caring too much. Some relatives forwarded the emails to us, concerned about her escalating language. All parties converged in family court the next morning. The courtroom felt smaller than I'd imagined, more intimate than intimidating. Liam's mother sat across from us, her new lawyer whispering last-minute strategies. Dad squeezed my shoulder as we took our seats. The judge reviewed all documentation methodically. The stalking photos, the embezzlement evidence, the psychological evaluation, the false reports to CPS. Each piece painted a clear picture of harassment and control. Liam's mother's lawyer tried to reframe everything as misunderstood maternal concern. When given the chance to speak, Liam's mother finally admitted the truth. She talked about her own teen pregnancy, how she'd felt trapped and alone. She'd wanted better for her son, couldn't bear watching him repeat her mistakes. The admission was raw, honest, and completely unexpected. Sarah testified about the impact on their family. She described years of controlling behavior, not just toward Liam, but toward her as well. She talked about the binders of surveillance photos, the constant scheming, the way her mother's obsession had poisoned their home. Her testimony was delivered with quiet strength. The judge asked me directly what outcome I sought. I explained that we didn't want to punish Liam's mother, but we needed protection. Noah deserved to grow up without manipulation and control. We needed boundaries that would be respected, not constantly tested and violated. I chose to request the restraining order without pursuing additional charges. The embezzlement case would proceed separately through criminal court, but I wouldn't pile on with harassment charges. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about safety and breaking cycles. The judge ordered Liam's mother to undergo therapy and maintain no contact with Noah until he turned 18. At that point, Noah could decide for himself whether to establish a relationship. The order included provisions for supervised communication with Liam, if both parties agreed. Liam's mother attempted to approach Noah after the ruling, moving toward us as we gathered our things. The bailiff stepped between us, gently but firmly directing her back. The look on her face wasn't anger anymore, just profound sadness and loss. Her final manipulation attempt came that evening. She sent Liam a message threatening to harm herself if he didn't bring Noah to see her. We recognized this tactic immediately and contacted emergency services. She was placed on a psychiatric hold for evaluation, getting the help she'd needed for years. The CPS case officially closed the following week. The final report noted that not only was Noah thriving, but the family had shown remarkable resilience in the face of targeted harassment. They commended our documentation, our cooperation, and our commitment to Noah's well-being. Liam received a text from his mother after her release from psychiatric hold. She wrote simply that she would always love him, even if he hated her. He didn't hate her. He pitied her, wished things could have been different, but recognized that her healing journey was hers to take. Our family began establishing new routines without the constant threat of interference. Dad continued his AA meetings, now sharing his story as inspiration for other parents struggling with addiction and family trauma. His transformation inspired others to seek help. 6 months passed. Noah took his first steps in our living room, the same room where Dad had once called me a mistake. Now it was filled with baby gates and toys, family photos covering the walls. Dad cheered louder than anyone, scooping Noah up and spinning him around. Liam finished his GED and enrolled in community college, working toward a degree in social work. His experience with the system had inspired him to help other families navigate similar challenges. His employer promoted him to shift supervisor, recognizing his maturity and dedication. Grandma's health stabilized completely. She hosted Sunday dinners that brought the entire extended family together. Dad's siblings became regular fixtures in our lives. Nicholas visited monthly, building a relationship with his nephew and supporting his brother. Sarah thrived living with her father. She stayed in touch, sending photos from school events and updates on her life. She'd found her voice through the ordeal, no longer afraid to speak truth even when it was difficult. Her courage had made all the difference. The financial restitution from Liam's mother's embezzlement went toward Noah's college fund. It felt like poetic justice that money she'd stolen to tear our family apart would instead secure Noah's future. The amount wasn't huge after legal fees, but it was a start. Dad and I had our first completely honest conversation on Noah's first birthday. We sat on the porch while the party continued inside, finally addressing years of pain without blame or defensiveness. He told me he was proud of the mother I'd become, that I'd shown strength he never knew existed. We talked about breaking cycles, about how each generation could choose differently. His father had abandoned him. He had emotionally abandoned me, but I had chosen to fight for Noah, to build family instead of destroying it. The chain of abandonment ended with us. I returned to school with renewed focus, my grades recovering as our lives stabilized. Teachers who'd watched me struggle now saw me excel. The guidance counselor helped me apply for scholarships specifically for young parents. My story of perseverance became my strength, not my shame. 1 year after that first CPS visit, our lives looked completely different. Noah toddled around the backyard, chasing bubbles Dad blew from a giant wand. Liam pushed him on the baby swing Grandma had installed insisted on buying. The same yard where I'd once hidden my pregnancy was now filled with the sounds of family. Liam's mother respected the restraining order, getting help through intensive therapy. We received updates through her treatment team, learning she was finally addressing decades of trauma and control issues. There was no contact, but there was hope for her healing. The house that had once echoed with silence and resentment now burst with life. Baby gates blocked the stairs. Toys littered every room. The basement where Noah had spent his first weeks was now a playroom, transformed from a secret shame into a space of joy. I watched Noah take confident steps across the living room, arms outstretched toward Dad. The man who'd wished he'd pulled out now caught his grandson with tears in his eyes, lifting him high in celebration. The transformation was complete, but the journey continued. Family photos lined the mantle where dust had once gathered. Dad sober and present. Liam working while finishing school. Grandma's health stable. Extended family integrated into our daily lives. And at the center, Noah, thriving despite how his story began. The cycle of abandonment and control that had plagued our family for generations was finally broken. Not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through daily choices to show up, to stay, to love, despite the challenges. Sometimes the youngest among us teach the greatest lessons about resilience and hope.